Hear that? Yeah, that's a great sound. I just love it when my neighbors are blowing leaves at 8 a.m. in the fucking morning. Alright, that's better. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Svetz Series. Josh Svetz here, and today we're taking a look at the new Mac Miller album, Swimming. And with that, let's go. Mac Miller is a hip-hop artist, producer, and rapper from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where he rose to prominence with mixtapes like The High Life, Kids, Best Day Ever, and that all led to a record deal with Rostrum Records. But Miller drastically shifted his perspective as he started to become more famous and get into a more druggy lifestyle. Each time, Miller was playing with new ideas and a new sonic makeup, whether it was the pained Macadelic, the absolutely introspective and super deep, watching movies with the sound off, the druggy acid trip that was Faces, or even the absolutely sadistic Delusional Thomas. Miller was constantly reinventing himself, constantly changing his sound, but he wasn't really reinventing himself per se. More, that was his feeling at the time. Because the one thing about Miller that's really interesting is the way that he feels and the way that he presents himself is 100% transparent in his music. He's one of the most authentic and genuine hip-hop artists. And while these albums were very challenging sonically, they were kind of messy and really reflective of the addiction and drug abuse problems that Miller was going through at the time. So it was very kind of heartwarming to see him release a tape like Good AM, which showed a much more mature Miller. And then with the follow-up Divine Feminine, he found supposed love with Ariana Grande and made a whole album dedicated to her and just how great women are. Which I actually enjoyed this album more than a lot of critics did, especially the needle drop. But I do recognize that Miller's vocals were a little tough at times, and there were some cringy songs. So knowing all this about Miller, his music is his diary. Vibe-wise and lyrically, how he feels and how he's thinking is exactly what you're going to hear in the music, making it all the more interesting when he had a hit-and-run incident after Ariana Grande left him. This also led to a relapse, so there's a lot of interesting things going on, and while as a fan I wanted Miller to feel better and be as good as possible, I couldn't help but be intrigued with the sonic direction that his next record would take. So Swimming is a pretty fitting title for this album, with Miller seeing all his demons as he tries to swim by them to find an inner peace. This album has way more themes of self-forgiveness and self-acceptance, really pivoting from a lot of expectation going on to the record and just what Miller's done in the past. This 13-track LP has more aquatic and watery production. It has fusions of jazz, it has fusions of funk, as well as some orchestral and classic overtones to it. Miller does address the breakup with Ariana Grande and his relapse quite a bit in this album, but he's painting it in a different set. Not really letting his demons fuel his creativity, but more recognizing that his demons are there and trying to just deal with them. And that vibe's immediately set with Come Back to Earth, the opening track, where he laments about how his depression has kind of made him antisocial and not feel like himself. Hurt Feelings has some nice kicks and some spacey production, where Miller talks about how he didn't appreciate his accomplishments and how he wants to kind of slow down and calm down to take it all in. He's kind of telling the cautionary tale of a workaholic creative who puts all their energy into their work and really only measures their full self-worth if the work is good or they're ascending in their career. Instead, kind of pivoting and saying that you need to appreciate more what you've done. And this is a super new take for Miller, because even in his more braggadocious tracks throughout his career, he always sounded like he had something to prove and there was this huge chip on his shoulder. And here he's just feng shui. What's the Use is a highlight for me with Thundercat's infectious, funky bass. Here he's employing a nice flow, speaking about his battles with addiction and his codependency on Grande and women in general, which he ties together beautifully by comparing the addiction to his dependency on women. The overall vibe of the track is just, it's a snapper, you know? Can you tell I can't snap? No, I can't snap, sorry. Perfecto isn't anything special sonically, but the premise is pretty noteworthy, with Miller talking about how he kind of see the signs of him and Grande's relationship falling apart, how it would become toxic, but in that moment he was just so fucked up mentally that he really couldn't discern, and he kind of needed her. I really love the refrain where he's talking about how there's all these little problems and all these kind of signs, but he just thinks that they're just bumps in the road and he's just ignoring it, and this relationship is worth it. And then his conscience comes in this background reverb vocal where it's going, is it? Wings is the first bad track for me, with Miller's vocals on the chorus just not being that interesting and not pleasant to listen to, and the production overall being very disjointed and just not connecting. It's a pretty lackluster track. But Ladders picks things up tremendously with a concept of comparing a night out to his depression, where he's saying that he understands that his mind isn't always going to be working right, and that he's going to lose that motivation and be sad and be depressed, so he needs to get in everything that he wants to do now, comparing that to a club setting when you're trying to hook up and you only have a certain amount of time to try and bring a girl home before the night's over, making allusions to shooting your shot, as well as just not waiting and seizing the moment. I know it feels so good right now, but it all comes falling down. And while I can really get behind this idea as someone with clinical depression who's experienced these type of things where your mind is so on and you just kind of want to hold that moment together before you start feeling sad and isolated and alone, for me the real highlight on this track is the gorgeous instrumentals. And these gorgeous instrumental breaks have an intoxicating jazz band feel with elements of funk. I also love the trumpet and the trombone on this track. He's really using a diverse set of instruments here, and I love everything about this track. Lyrically and sonically, it just blends together beautifully. So it's sad that the worst track, Small Worlds, comes right after, with Miller trying this Kanye-esque flow, and it doesn't really work. He doesn't pull it off well. The instrumentals and the production's also very skeletal, and it's just not a good track to listen to. 2009 is this awesome orchestral track with full violin and a string set and piano. This is a song for OG Mac Miller fans, where he takes us back to 2009, painting a picture of asking himself, was the mental anguish and all the demons worth it to rise and be famous? He's really reflecting on his mindset when he was a kid in 2009 and then comparing it to his mindset now that he has that hindsight to really look back. And the magnitude of the song is only enhanced with the orchestral production, which is so beautiful that it's tear-inducing. So It Goes is this final wrap-up to the album where Miller talks about how he may lose relevance and he ultimately needs to accept this and accept what life is going to throw at him instead of flying off the deep end or trying to chase highs in order to supplement that happiness. The ending strings here represent Miller finally getting through his demons on the swim and swimming to a peaceful, angelic state. So again, Miller has subverted expectations. Whereas people probably thought he would make a very drugged out, confused album about his pain and his heartache, he actually made an album about self-acceptance and having more self-worth. Every song matches the vibe well, and I think the concepts connect enough where it's probably one of the more cohesive hip-hop albums I've heard this year. And the good does come from that gorgeous production with some of Miller's sick flow to match it, and the lyrical content and the overall concept of the album, especially how cohesive it is. But some awkward mixes, lackluster production, forgettable songs, and some cringy vocal work here and there. Though there is some good vocal work, there's a lot of not great vocal work. Kind of hold this project back from being great. So when you're rating albums, you have to kind of try and put yourself in the mind of the artist and see if their vision came to life in the way they intended. And I believe Miller's did. It's not perfect, kind of like Miller as a person, but you'd be hard-pressed to come away from this record without at least having a few tracks that really resonate with you and might actually help you. I actually recommend listening to this album if you're struggling with ideas of self-worth, if you're a creative in a depressive route, if you have depression, or you're battling some type of substance abuse or any type of addiction. So if you asked me what I thought of Mac Miller's Swimming, I'd tell you it's a cool project. It's cool. It's bordering between great. It's just on that line between it's definitely good, but I don't know if it's quite great. So it's right there. It's right there. It's very close, but it's just not fully there. Still a very good project and definitely one that I think you should check out. But what did y'all think? Comment below and make your voice heard. Like, subscribe, and don't be afraid to criticize. This has been the Svetz Series. Now send me your queries.
Red and black sweater like my name is Freddy. Color spaghetti. I so messy. Pico khaki. Never lucky. Keep that 30 in my jacket. Look at the diamonds, they on hush mode.